Hey everybody. Now that we are done with our overview of the ancient world, it's time to move from antiquity into the medieval period. And you'll notice that the medieval period goes by some other terms, including the Middle Ages, and that's because when we look at the root word of medieval, we see right there, M-E-D-I, which literally means middle. So that's where the term Middle Ages or medieval period comes from. And sometimes you'll also hear referred to as the Dark Ages. And this term comes about because a lot of people look at this time in history as literally unenlightened or darkness, that there's really not much going on. But as we start to move through the overview as well as the period literature in the coming weeks, we'll see that that's really not true, kind of a very small look at an extended part of history. So what is going on in the middle period? The middle period begins with the fall of Rome, as we see to the left, depiction of Rome burning after the barbarians continue to sack and pillage and loot Rome, which happened, the last one be 476, so we can roughly round that to 500 Common Era. And then the Renaissance, as we see to our right. And the Renaissance was the flowering, the rediscovery of all the knowledge that was lost when Rome fell. So that resulted in an incredible explosion in the visual arts, such as painting and sculpture, as well as architecture, the growth of cities, advancements in science and technologies, the age of exploration. All of that is the Renaissance. And it's really hard to pin down a beginning year for the Renaissance. So again, roughly, we can just round it to 1500. So 1500 Common Era. So as you see here, this is 1,000 years for us to squeeze down in a survey course like we have with World Lit. So we have a tough job ahead of us. So basic overarching question to ask is, what was life like in the medieval period? Society was broken down based upon the three estates, moving from top to bottom of the pyramid as we see here. At the top we have the clergy. Those would be the people who work in the church, priests, monks, nuns, right? The people who come into contact with, as well as the upper church officials, the bishops, the cardinals, as well as the pope. Then we have the second estate, which is the nobles, the nobility. King, queen, right? The princess, the prince, and then all the dukes and counts and all the hangers-on, right? All of that is the second estate. And then there's us. We are the third estate. We are not only the peasants, but the people who process the wool, the grain. We're the people who sell it, the people who take care of each other, everything you can think of. That's the third estate. Important fact about this visual here that we see on the left, this pyramid, of course, is broken up so we can fit everything in with the descriptors and examples. But the third estate, right, this is everybody else. This accounted for roughly, believe it or not, 90% of the population. So, of course, that's what it would look like. The third estate would be all of this. Boom, all this is going to be the third estate because that's what makes society go. Now, one thing with the social pyramid in the medieval period, it was pretty much impossible to move up. Reason being, of course, is that the nobility is based upon bloodline, right? So you can't decide one day that you're going to wake up and become a prince. And the idea of a noble marrying down would be frowned upon. The only thing that would really happen as far as social mobility, if you were, say, for example, somebody in the third estate and you had a son or daughter who was obviously gifted and very promising, then you could take that son or daughter and have that son or daughter become a nun, a monk, or even possibly a priest. They could enter and become the clergy. So now, this yielded feudalism. So again, we still have this same pyramid, right? The same social pyramid, and three estates yield this type of development. So at the top again, we have the king, and below the king we have the lords, right? And below the lords we have the knights. The medieval period, this is the knights in shining armor, right? Defeating the dragons and the monsters. This is going on during this time. And then again, we have everybody at the bottom. This is where we would be. And again, just as before, this 90%, right? This could be, boom, of course, the king, right? That'd be just a little bit right there. So this is everybody here. And an important thing you'll note from this visual is that these different tiers are interlocked, right? So the lords would pledge loyalty to the king and military aid, and the king would take care of his lords, right? And then it just works its way down. So there's everything that we have here is interlocked, right? So the lords would take care of their knights, and the knights would serve their lords. And then down at the bottom, this is us. We have to pay our taxes, we have to pay our rent, but in turn we would get protection and food and shelter from the class above us. So an important thing about the three estates and feudalism, even though there was no such thing as social mobility, it engendered ties of loyalty as well as, the idea of obedience. An important thing with the medieval period is that people really liked order and structure. Everybody had a place in the life in the medieval period, and you're expected to be in that place and then stay in there. So in the next lecture, we'll continue moving through.